Hello and welcome to the Writer's Workout course called Writing for Teens. I will be teaching this course and my name is Casie Bazay. I am a young adult author and my book is called Not Our Summer. It is a YA contemporary novel that came out in 2021 with Running Press, which is an imprint of Hachette. I also have a short story that will be coming out this year, I believe in May, with Inked and Gray Press, so you can look for that as well. Okay, so let's start with my background, who I am, and my journey into traditional publication. So I am a former middle school teacher, and because I was a teacher, I incorporated a lot of books and reading, no matter what subject I taught. So that is where I developed a love of young adult literature, also middle grade literature. I was always a reader, but I typically read adult books, until that time. And then I realized, these books for teens are actually, they appeal to everyone, adults even. So I developed a love for these books, and it planted a seed that maybe one day I would try to write one of these books. So I did not start writing until I left the teaching profession in 2010 to stay home with my kids when they were young. I started writing freelance to make some side money, and I also decided I would start my first novel. So I always had the goal of writing a young adult novel, and I started my first one, did not finish the first novel, as so often happens. Didn't really have a fully evolved idea, so I ended up dropping that idea, eventually coming up with another idea, and it would take me 3 years to complete my first young adult novel. Most of that was because I was starting and stopping and revising and not pushing forward to get through that novel. But I finally made it. 3 years later, I had a finished novel that I queried. I had a little bit of interest in it, but it was a dystopian novel, and by that time, dystopian, had moved on. And I realized if I wanted to get published, I had this goal of being traditionally published, I probably needed to move on and write something else. So I wrote a middle grade novel next. I'm not sure what sparked that idea, but I knew, once I had the idea, it was a lot of my ideas come from coming up with a character. So this character was younger. I realized this would be a middle grade or upper middle grade novel. Wrote that, queried it, didn't get anywhere, had some interest, enough to keep me going. Wrote another novel, another YA contemporary. Again, queried it. This one didn't do as well. It was kind of a quieter novel, so it didn't do so well, with agents. I ended up writing a fourth novel, which became my first published book, Not Our Summer. So it took me 4 tries, 4.5, to actually get published. So just a little background on how I became published. I did not get an agent first, as many people so often do if they're going the traditional route. Not that I wasn't trying to get an agent, but I would usually participate in Twitter pitch contests, and I happened to participate in Pit Mad. That's one that I don't believe is going on anymore, but I, tweeted out my pitches, whatever time of year it was, I don't remember. And I ended up having a couple of agents, and an editor from a Big 5 house liked my tweet. So I queried. I was at the tail end of my querying journey, with this book by that time. But so I went ahead and queried the agents and the editor, which typically, you don't want to do both at the same time. But I did, because I was at the end, or what I thought was the end of my journey. Ended up, the editor really liked the book, and I got, a few months later, a publishing offer from that editor. So she, recommended or asked if I still wanted to try to get an agent. I thought that would probably be a wise idea, just to help me navigate the whole traditional publishing idea here, and like working through that contract and understanding the lingo. I thought it would probably be wise to go ahead and get an agent if I could. So I did query a few more agents, letting them know that I had a publishing offer in hand, and I ended up signing with an agent. So, long story short, it took me approximately 4.5 years, to get that publishing offer. And from the time I actually started writing or working on my very first book to publication, that was approximately 10 years. It's a very long process. Some people can do it more quickly, but oftentimes you'll find that it's going to take a while. So that is me in a nutshell, and let's go ahead and get started with the presentation. To begin with, I have 3 photos here. 2 of them are inspiration pictures I found online that I used to create mood boards for 2 different books. So I usually like to have some kind of visual representation of each book that I write. I create it somewhere along the process. Usually the earlier the better. So I like to find pictures of what I think each character would look like and then create, this mood board or this collage so I can kind of refer back to that whenever I need to. Okay, the third picture, you can probably tell which one, is not from a mood board. It's actually me when I was a teenager. This is my senior picture. So the reason I included myself here is to show that though we're writing about teenagers, we don't necessarily have to be a teenager to write about, kids of this age, because we've all been there, right? So chances are you are an adult who has been a teenager, or you are possibly a teenager right now. So as long as you have gone through the experience of being a teen, or you're currently going through it, you understand the heightened emotions, all the firsts that are occurring during this time. And it's an exciting and it's an emotional, sometimes dramatic time in a person's life. So really anyone is equipped to write for teens. So just wanted to put that out there first. So moving on to the first slide, I am going to talk about age category versus genre. So there are some misconceptions here sometimes, especially among newer writers. Some people think that young adult is a genre, but this is not true. Young adult is an age category, not a genre. We are writing for a specific age category, but that does not really tell us what type of book it is, because within the young adult age category, there can be many different genres. So just like books that are geared for adults, you've got your historical, you've got your sci-fi, you've got your fantasy. So we have I would say almost all of those same genres within the young adult category. The exception would be erotica. So just keep that in mind whenever you are, querying or getting ready to pitch your book. Make sure you're not just saying it's young adult. Make sure you're also including the genre. So the correct way to categorize your book to an agent or a publisher is to say that it's a young adult fantasy, a young adult contemporary, or whatever genre it is. So moving on, let's talk about point of view and tense. When you are writing for teens or writing YA, first person present tense is what you are going to most often see. If you go to the library or bookstore, pick up any YA book, that's going to be the most common. It doesn't mean you have to write from that POV and use that verb tense, but that is what's most common. First person is very common when writing for teens because teens really like to get inside that character's head and know all of their thoughts and feelings and really see the world and the story from that person's point of view. So that is why it's most popular. However, you can choose to write from third person if you wish. Choose a POV and a tense, a verb tense, past or present, that best suits you and your writing style and your book. So it doesn't have to be what everyone else is doing. It can be what best suits you in the book. For example, I tend to write in first person present tense for all of my books. My short stories I usually write in third person and past tense. It's just something I decided to do. My short stories usually are more adult though. They're not YA. I did, however, write one of my books, my YA books, in third person. And I'm not sure why I chose to do that, maybe just to kind of experiment and try something different. But when I had beta readers, they mentioned, I think the story would be best told from first person. So they were right. I, played around with it a little bit, rewrote the first chapter in first person, and lo and behold, it did sound and come off much better in first person because, I'm telling this coming of age story from this one female protagonist point of view. So it was really best if we could get inside her head and know what she was thinking and feeling throughout the story. So I ended up rewriting that whole book in first person. So, sometimes that happens, but, try to really figure out which one is best before starting. That way you don't have to rewrite the whole book. If you are unsure, again, you can just play around with it. You can write a scene in both third person and first person and see which works best. You can also, play around with the tense and see which one you like best. Present tense does tend to bring about a sense of immediacy to the story. So since teen books, YA books, tend to, have faster pacing, just to really kind of keep teenagers engaged in the book, that's why present tense works well. So as you become more skilled as a writer, you can also include or incorporate multiple POVs if you wish, and you can even change tenses, from scene to scene or from chapter to chapter. That works well if you have a dual timeline, say something that's happening now, something that happened in the past, and you're switching back and forth. Most of my books are written in at least dual or multi-POV. That's just something I enjoy doing because I really like to show a story through multiple different characters' eyes. So that, again, is a personal choice, but very important to choose the point of view and the tense that works best for you. So next, let's talk about choosing an appropriate protagonist for your book. So the protagonist, first and foremost, should be a teenager. Since we're writing for teens, we want the main character or main characters to be teens. So anywhere between the ages of 13 through 19. Occasionally, you will see a YA book where the character is 20, possibly 21, though technically this would be considered new adult. Sometimes publishing recognizes this category, sometimes it doesn't. That's why you might pick up a book that's, on the YA shelf at the library or the bookstore, where the character is a little older, but they're still categorizing it as YA. That does happen. So within YA, we have two distinct categories. So we have lower YA and we have upper YA. So again, that's just depending on the age of your character. There is a greater need, from what I hear right now, of lower YA. There just isn't a lot of it out there. So if you are interested in writing, from a little bit younger point of view, that may present some more opportunities or some better opportunities right now in publishing. So just keep in mind that no matter what age you decide to go with, your protagonist should sound and act their age. So if we are writing for teens, we don't want to be basically putting an adult in a 17-year-old's body and just presenting that character who doesn't make the same types of choices, who doesn't see the world through, a teen lens. So make sure that you are, making your characters' actions and dialogue and all of that appropriate to their age. Again, you can have multiple points of view or multiple teen protagonists, as I do in Not Our Summer. I have KJ and Becca, who you see here on the right. I kind of made a little graphic here when I was at Key West. This is a photo from Key West, and the girls traveled to Key West, so I kind of inserted them into this photo. So you can have multiple teen POVs. Becca and KJ happen to be 18, so this is definitely an upper YA. So that is up to you as to, how many protagonists you want to have and the age. Just make sure that they are indeed a teenager. All right, let's talk about keeping it real with dialogue, voice, and tone. Dialogue is a very important component of any story. And when we're writing for teens especially, we need to make sure that it sounds realistic. In other words, it sounds the way that teens actually speak. So 2 things just to keep in mind. You do not want to have any long monologues where a character is just standing there and word vomiting, for lack of a better phrase, to their friend. So not only is that not realistic, but it's also boring to the reader. So you want to have a lot of conversing back and forth between the characters. You also do not want to start each section of dialogue by saying a character's name. We should be able to figure out, who is talking, just by other parts of the story with dialogue tags or actions that you're including, in between the quotes. So we don't need to say each character's name as another character is speaking to them. That is something I tend to see with newer writers. So just for the most part, keep those names out. So one thing I didn't include here in the slide, but just to mention it, teens do tend to curse, probably more so than a lot of adults. That is up to you if you want to include that in your story. Some people do like to make it very realistic. I happen to be one of those people. I like to, if my character is somebody who would curse, then I'm going to include a few curse words. Some people, don't like that and they want to write a cleaner story. So that is author preference. That's up to you. But I do recommend including a little bit of slang. You don't want to go overboard with it. Also keep in mind that slang changes, from month to month, even year to year. So we don't want to date our contemporary stories by adding a lot of slang that by the time the book comes out, it's going to be old and nobody's going to know what it means. But if it's something that's been around for a while, that teens typically say, you may want to include it. All right, so read your dialogue once you have it written. Make sure it sounds good, that it's flowing, it sounds realistic. I also recommend just reading all of your work out loud or listening to it on a text-to-speech app. I like to do that just after I've written my story and got it polished. I will go back and listen to the whole thing just to make sure that everything sounds good. Okay, next let's talk about voice. Voice is defined as the unique style, personality, or perspective of a piece of writing. Voice is, kind of your personality, your writing personality coming out in the story. There are certain voices that are better suited for YA, but this is something that you can play around with. You don't have one voice and that's, all you're ever going to have. You can change your writing voice. So the best way to, get a feel for what I'm talking about with voice is to just pick up a lot of different YA books and just kind of note the distinct personality or the flavor of that story. And, it should be pretty easy to figure out after a while. Okay, next let's talk about tone. This is defined as the mood implied by an author's language and word choice or the way that a text can make the reader feel. So tone tends to naturally come out with each story. It's not usually something we have to think too hard about. And there's room to play around with tone as well and to, further hone it. But no matter what, the tone should fit the genre. So for example, a YA rom-com should have somewhat of a comedic tone. It should not be heavy or sad or dark. If it's a rom-com, that's something, we're trying to make the reader laugh. So we want to have a comedic tone. A YA horror, on the other hand, should have an eerie tone. All right, moving on to the next slide. Difficult subjects and themes. Are they okay for teens? So if you've read very much YA, then you should know that the short answer is yes. You do not have to shy away from difficult subjects or topics just because you're writing for teens. Teens can, and they already do, deal with a lot of these topics anyways. So grief, abuse, sex, or social justice issues are just some examples. Like I said, teens are already dealing with many of these things. They're much more savvy than sometimes we adults give them credit for. So reading books about these difficult subjects can help them to better empathize with, somebody who may be going through that, or better deal with their own issues, because many teens are already dealing with these things. So again, we don't need to shy away from difficult things in our YA books. So let's take a look at some examples. Example number 1 of a YA book that deals with some difficult topics is Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. I'll just read the blurb here. When legendary R&B artist Corey Fields spots Enchanted Jones at an audition, her dreams of being a famous singer take flight. Until Enchanted wakes up with blood on her hands and zero memory of the previous night. Who killed Corey Fields? Before there was a dead body, Enchanted's dreams had turned into a nightmare, because behind Corey's charm and star power was a controlling dark side. Now he's dead, the police are at the door, and all signs point to Enchanted. So this book reads like a murder mystery, but it does deal with some difficult topics such as physical and emotional abuse, and there is also reference to a rape. So again, just an example of a book that doesn't shy away from tough topics. This is one of my all-time favorite YA books. It's called As Many Nows as I Can Get by Shana Youngdahl. And to read the blurb, again, it's in one impulsive moment, the summer before they leave for college, Scarlett and David plunge into a brief and irresistible swirl of romance, particle physics, and questionable decisions. Scarlett and David have known each other all their lives in small-town Graceville, Colorado, where David is just another mountain in the background, until one day he is suddenly so much more than that, so much more than part of the scenery. Magnetic, spontaneous, David is a gravitational force, and Scarlett, pragmatic, wry, eye on the future, welcomes the pull he has on her, even as she resists it. So this book, Shana is a poet, so you can tell when you read the book that it's very poetic, just beautifully written, but it does deal with some difficult topics. One of them is teen pregnancy. I don't want to give away too much of what happens here, but just goes to show that, there's really no topic that is off limits, especially for upper YA. These characters are a little bit older. They've just graduated. They're getting ready to go to college. But again, this is suited for upper YA readers. Another example of a YA book that deals with a difficult topic is I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica L. Sanchez. I will read the blurb here. Perfect Mexican daughters do not go away to college, and they do not move out of their parents' house after high school graduation. Perfect Mexican daughters never abandon their family. But Julia is not your perfect Mexican daughter. That was Olga's role. Then a tragic accident on the busiest street in Chicago leaves Olga dead and Julia left to reassemble the shattered pieces of her family. And no one seems to acknowledge that Julia is broken too. Instead, her mother seems to channel her grief into pointing out every possible way Julia has failed. But it's not long before Julia discovers that Olga might not have been as perfect as everyone thought. With the help of her best friend, Lorena, and her first love, first everything boyfriend, Connor, Julia is determined to find out. Was Olga really what she seemed, or was there more to her sister's story? And either way, how can Julia even attempt to live up to a seemingly impossible ideal? So you can probably catch from the blurb here that this book deals with grief. So the whole story, throughout the whole story, Julia is dealing with the grief of losing her sister, her only sister. So it's sometimes tough to read about these things, but teens don't necessarily need to be sheltered from topics like this. Since I spoke about voice earlier, I would highly recommend, if you're looking for a really voicey book, just to see an example, this book is great. She has a really great voice in this book. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about some do's and don'ts of when you are writing for teens. So, some things that you do want to do. You definitely want to read a lot in your age category, which is YA, either lower or upper YA. And you want to read the genres that you are choosing to write. So, if you are writing YA fantasy, make sure you're reading a lot of current YA fantasy. If you're reading sci fi, make sure that you're reading a lot of current YA sci fi. Doesn't hurt to read in a variety of genres as well, just to get a feel for what's out there and what's popular. And when I say current, that's important just if you are, especially seeking traditional publication. What was put out 20, 30 years ago is definitely not going to be what publishers are putting out right now. Something else you want to do is connect with other YA authors through critique or writers groups, attending conferences where there will be other YA writers, or where there will be topics or speakers who will talk about writing for teens as well, such as this conference you're attending right now. SCBWI is a great organization to join. This stands for Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators. It's a nationwide in the U.S. Organization. I don't know about other countries, but there is a chapter, I think, in most every state or in a nearby state that where you can attend their meetings and conferences, and they do a lot of online things as well. You also, especially if you're new to writing for teens, you want to continue to hone your YA writing voice. It may take some work. It may not come out perfectly the first time you write a book. You may have to rewrite that book, or you might have to move on to a second book to, further hone that voice, but just continue to work on that. As far as don'ts, you do not want to talk down to your readers. When writing for teens, we don't want to talk to them like we are above them and they are lesser. So teens will pick up on that right away, and they will put that book down. They will not want to read that. So likewise, we don't want to try to teach a lesson through the story. Nobody's reading a book to learn a lesson. They're reading for entertainment, or, just to kind of escape reality. They don't want to be talked down to, and they don't want somebody trying to teach them something, in a very overt way anyways. Lastly, do not avoid those difficult subjects that we talked about, and also don't avoid using higher level language or even more advanced story structures because you think that teens can't handle it, because they can. Teens that are reading are pretty smart, so they can handle that higher level language. If there's a word or even a phrase they don't know, they can usually pick up on the meaning just through context clues within the paragraph. More advanced story structures, such as like a dual timeline or even multi-timeline story where we've got 3 or more different timelines going on at once and we're switching back and forth. As long as that's done correctly, teens can handle that as well. So don't shy away from things like that, because again, teens can handle it. All right, wrapping up, just wanted to let you all know where you can find me. I'm online at Twitter/X at Casie Bazay. Instagram, same name. I've also got a Facebook page, author page that you can go follow. And of course, a website where I put out occasional blog posts, and 4 times a year, I also have a newsletter that you can sign up for. So reach out to me if you have a question on my website or any of those social media platforms if you want to connect there. Just as a side note, I also offer query, sub-package, and full manuscript critiques. So for anyone who is querying agents or publishers, or even if you're going the self-pub route, I offer those and can help you out there. One last thing is I offer horse guru consults. That just means that I am available for consultation if you have horse content and you just want to make sure that it's accurate. I can definitely help you out there as well. And I will end with just a little spiel for my book, Not Our Summer. This is the story of 5 trips, 2 cousins, 1 family feud, and a summer that will forever change KJ and Becca's lives. And it is available anywhere books are sold. Hope you'll check it out. Thanks for attending. Bye.